Hello, and welcome back, curious mind. If you close your eyes and imagine a spider's web, you might see something delicate, perhaps silver threads glistening in the dawn light, dew clinging like tiny glass beads. But this web is different. It isn't strung between branches or tucked into a forgotten corner of your ceiling. This web is invisible, sprawling, and far stranger than anything a spider could weave. It stretches across minds, societies, and even the way you see yourself. You've lived in it your whole life, though you've probably never seen its strands. This is the web of illusions. Illusions are often thought of as tricks, a magician's flourish, a sleight of hand, a rabbit produced from an empty hat. But the kind we're talking about tonight are much more subtle. They are illusions of perception, memory, identity, even time. They don't just fool you for a moment, they shape your entire reality. And what's more, they're not mistakes in your brain's wiring. They're part of the design. Your brain, that 3-pound lump of electrified jelly inside your skull, is less concerned with the truth than it is with something far more useful: efficiency. The world is vast, chaotic, and full of information. Every second, billions of sensory inputs flood your eyes, ears, nose, skin, and tongue. If you tried to process them all faithfully, you'd be overwhelmed in moments. So your brain does what any overworked employee might do. It cuts corners, fills in gaps, and sometimes just makes things up. And you never even notice. Take vision, for example. Right now, your eyes are lying to you. You have a blind spot in each eye where the optic nerve connects to the retina. There's no light-detecting tissue there at all. A literal hole in your vision. But do you see 2 dark circles floating in your view? No. Your brain quietly paints over the gaps, blending colours and patterns so seamlessly you'd never know the hole existed. That's not a glitch. That's a feature. The illusion of a complete visual field is more useful than the messy truth. But that's just the start. Your entire sense of the now is also a construct. You might think the present is something your brain experiences instantly, but it isn't. In reality, it waits, just a little, before presenting the world to you. Around 1/10 of a second, sometimes more. Why? Because different senses process at different speeds, and your brain wants to synchronize them into one smooth moment. What you think of as real time is actually a polished highlight reel of events that have already happened. The deeper you go, the more you realize how much of your life is filtered through these invisible edits. Memory, for instance, is not a faithful recording. It's more like a retelling, one that changes each time you remember it. Scientists call this reconsolidation, and it means that recalling a memory makes it vulnerable, open to being altered before it's stored again. Over years, a single event can shift, warp, or even swap details entirely, and yet you'll swear it happened exactly as you remember. And then there's identity, perhaps the most elaborate illusion of all. You probably feel like you have a single, continuous self, the same you from childhood to now. But your brain is more like a parliament of mental processes, each with its own agenda. Neuroscientists studying split-brain patients, people whose left and right hemispheres have been surgically separated, have found that each hemisphere can act independently, even offering different answers to the same question. And yet, when one side acts without the other knowing why, the brain invents a story to explain it, and the person believes it. That self you feel so certain about, it's the best guess your brain can come up with in the moment. Some illusions are universal, baked into the very structure of human cognition. Others are learned, passed down through culture, tradition, and language. These cultural illusions are especially powerful because they're invisible, the way fish might be unaware of water. Your sense of beauty, morality, even common sense has been shaped by invisible threads spun long before you were born. You inherit not just genes, but entire perceptual frameworks. The web of illusions isn't necessarily sinister. In fact, without it, life might be unbearable. If you saw the world exactly as it is, unfiltered, uncompressed, stripped of every shortcut, you'd be paralyzed by its complexity. Illusions help you move, decide, and survive, but they also make you vulnerable, because anything that can shape your reality can also be exploited. Magicians know this, so do advertisers, and politicians. The web can guide, comfort, or ensnare. For now, picture it: a vast, invisible network, each strand a belief, a perception, a memory. You're not standing outside it looking in, you're inside it, woven into it, every thought and sensation a vibration along its threads. And like any web, it has patterns. Follow them closely enough, and you might begin to see the shape of the thing. But be warned, once you see the threads, you can't unsee them. And tonight, we're going to trace them. One by one. We'll start with the most obvious strand in the web, your vision. It's tempting to think of your eyes as cameras, faithfully capturing the world and sending the footage to your brain. But that's a comforting myth. Your eyes don't see reality. They see whatever your brain tells them to. Let's take a simple example. The colour you see as red. You might think red exists in the outside world, a property of apples, stop signs and sunsets. But in truth, red is a sensation created entirely in your brain. The world itself contains only electromagnetic waves of various lengths. Some of those waves hit your eyes, triggering cone-shaped photoreceptor cells in your retina. Those cells send electrical signals to your brain, which then interprets them as colour. The redness of a rose isn't out there in the petals. It's in here, inside your head. But the trick runs deeper. Your brain doesn't even stick to the input it's given. Under the right conditions, it will invent colours that don't exist in the real spectrum at all. Scientists call them impossible colours, like reddish green or yellowish blue, combinations you'll never see in nature, but can be induced under experimental conditions. And then there are illusions, like the famous checker shadow effect, where two squares of identical brightness appear wildly different because of the context around them. Your brain isn't lying maliciously, it's making adjustments to maintain what it thinks is a stable image of the world. But in doing so, it creates an experience that is, technically speaking, false. Motion is no more trustworthy. Ever sat in a stationary train and felt like you were moving because the train next to you started rolling? That's your brain misattributing relative movement. Even when you're genuinely in motion, what you perceive is a reconstruction. Your eyes take snapshots, your brain smooths them into a continuous flow, and the gaps in between are filled in with educated guesses. Most of the time, those guesses are good enough. Sometimes they aren't, which is why you can be fooled into seeing motion where there is none, as in a flip book or a movie. Depth perception. That's an illusion too. Your eyes get two slightly different images, and your brain stitches them together to infer distance. Close one eye, and you lose much of that ability, yet your brain will still do its best to fake it based on size, texture, and shadow cues. In fact, you're so accustomed to these cues that artists have been using them to trick your brain for centuries, from Renaissance perspective paintings to sidewalk chalk art that seems to rise from the pavement. Perhaps the most humbling thing is how quickly these visual illusions work, and how stubborn they are. Even when you know you're being tricked, even when you understand the mechanics, the illusion doesn't go away. You can stare at the Muller-Lyer lines and swear the arrows make one line longer than the other, even after measuring them. That persistence tells you something important. The illusion isn't just in your mind, it's built into the machinery of perception itself. And here's where the web analogy deepens. Vision doesn't happen in isolation. Your sense of sight is constantly being cross-referenced with other senses. If your brain gets conflicting information, it will try to resolve it, and sometimes it will override one sense in favour of another. This is the basis of the ventriloquist effect, where a sound seems to come from a moving puppet's mouth instead of the hidden speaker, simply because your eyes insist it must. In the web of illusions, one strand can pull another out of shape. The truth is, you never see the world as it is. You see the world as your brain predicts it should be, updated moment by moment with incoming sensory data. In that sense, perception is less like opening your eyes and more like dreaming with constraints. And once you realize that, you start to wonder, if vision can be bent so easily, what about the rest of your reality? We'll get there. But for now, keep this in mind. What you see is not the truth. It's your brain's best guess. And sometimes the guesses are wrong in fascinating ways. Close your eyes for a moment. Listen. Maybe you hear the hum of a refrigerator, the distant rush of traffic, or the faint tapping of your own heartbeat in your ears. Now imagine a world without any of that, a perfect absolute silence. Even there, your brain wouldn't leave you alone. In the absence of sound, it will sometimes invent its own. This is because hearing, like vision, is more about your brain's expectations than about raw input. Your ears are simply air pressure detectors, translating vibrations into electrical signals. But those signals are messy, incomplete. Your brain smooths them out, fills the gaps, and in some cases, adds in details that were never there. Take the phonemic restoration effect. If someone speaks a sentence and replaces a syllable with a cough, you'll still hear the missing syllable as if it had been spoken. Your brain simply inserts it, guided by context. It's an auditory patch job, and you don't get a choice in the matter. Music is perhaps the most elegant example of auditory illusion. A melody can be suggested without all its notes being played, thanks to a phenomenon called the missing fundamental. Play a series of harmonics without the bass note, and your brain will still hear the pitch as if it's there. You're not hearing the sound, you're hearing your brain's reconstruction of it. And then there's the McGurk effect, a perfect demonstration of how sound and sight get tangled in the web. If you see a video of a person mouthing FA, but the audio says bar, you'll often hear far instead of bar. Your brain trusts your eyes over your ears, even when it shouldn't. The illusion persists, even if you know the trick. The really strange thing is that silence itself is an illusion. Your auditory system never truly shuts down. In very quiet environments, you might hear a faint ringing, a phenomenon called tinnitus. For most, it's temporary, a side effect of the auditory system amplifying its own internal static when there's no real input. Your brain abhors a sensory vacuum, so it fills it. And sound has its own blind spots, just like vision. You can't perceive frequencies below about 20 Hz or above 20,000 Hz. Those ranges are invisible to your ears, yet they shape the world in ways you can't sense. Elephants use infrasonic calls to communicate over kilometers. Bats navigate with ultrasonic chirps far beyond your range. To them, the acoustic world is a tapestry of detail you'll never hear. Another reminder that what you perceive is a tiny curated slice of reality. Sound illusions aren't just curiosities, they're part of how you navigate life. Your ability to locate where a sound comes from depends on the tiny difference in time it reaches each ear. But if those timing cues are tampered with, say in a concert hall designed with intentional echoes, your brain can be tricked into hearing space where there is none. Movie sound designers use this constantly, placing a sound so precisely in the stereo field that you feel a presence behind you that doesn't exist. And there's an emotional layer to all this. Certain sounds trigger specific feelings, the warmth of a crackling fire, the threat in an approaching thunderclap, not because the sounds themselves contain emotion, but because your brain has linked them to past experiences and biological instincts. These associations can be manipulated. A soundtrack can make a peaceful meadow feel ominous or a shadowy alley seem romantic. In the web of illusions, the strand of sound is intimately woven with memory, sight, and emotion. You can't separate them cleanly. If your brain decides the sound doesn't match the rest of the picture, it will alter your perception to keep the whole thing coherent. And that's the point. Coherence, not truth, is what your mind is built for. It means that, much like vision, you don't hear the world as it is. You hear the world as your brain thinks it should be. If vision shows you that perception can be bent, and hearing proves it can be filled in, memory will make you question whether anything you recall is real at all. You probably think of memory as a library, a neat archive where your experiences are filed away in order, waiting to be pulled out. But that's an illusion. Memory is more like a story you rewrite every time you tell it. When you remember something, your brain reactivates the network of neurons that fired during the original event. But here's the catch. During that reactivation, the memory is malleable. New information can sneak in, details can shift. When you save the memory again, it's updated, not necessarily with the truth, but with whatever makes sense in the moment. Scientists call this reconsolidation, and it means that every time you recall a moment, you risk altering it. There's a famous experiment where participants were shown a video of a car accident and later asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? Others were asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? Just the change of a single word, hit to smashed, led people to remember higher speeds and even non-existent broken glass. Memory is as suggestible as wet clay. Sometimes entire memories can be fabricated. In one study, researchers convinced participants they had been lost in a shopping mall as children, an event that never happened, simply by suggesting it and providing a few fabricated details. After repeated recall, participants described the memory vividly, complete with invented sensory details. Your brain doesn't store a perfect image of the past, it stores fragments, key moments, emotions, the general outline. The gaps are filled in later, often with the help of other memories, cultural expectations, or outright imagination. This is why eyewitness testimony, despite sounding convincing, is notoriously unreliable. Even more unsettling is that memory is tied to identity. You believe you are the same person who lived through your memories, but if those memories are mutable, and they are, then the you built from them is too. The self is a patchwork quilt of recollections, stitched together and constantly being restitched, sometimes with entirely new fabric. Of course, memory's fallibility isn't always a flaw. Imagine if you remembered every moment of your life in perfect, unfiltered detail. The noise would drown you. Forgetting is as important as remembering. It's how you prioritize, adapt, and move forward. In a way, forgetting is a feature, not a bug. Still, it leaves you with a question. If your vision can be tricked, your hearing edited, and your memories rewritten, how much of your reality is actually real? And how much of it is just a well-constructed mirage, spun by your own mind to keep the world coherent? We've only touched 3 threads of the web, and already it's hard to tell where truth ends and illusion begins. You might think of time as a river, flowing at a steady pace, carrying you from past to present to future, without pause. Seconds tick by in equal measure, minutes stack neatly into hours, hours into days. But in the web of illusions, time is not a river, it's a trick of the mind. Your brain doesn't have a clock in the traditional sense. Instead, it builds a sense of time from change, from events, movements, and sensory inputs. When more happens, time feels longer. When less happens, time contracts. This is why a long, uneventful drive seems shorter in memory than a single, busy afternoon in a new city. It's also why childhood summers seem to stretch on forever. Your young brain was encountering more novelty, laying down more distinct memories, making the passage of time feel full. In moments of danger, this illusion can warp dramatically. People who've survived accidents often report that time seemed to slow down, every detail becoming vivid. This isn't because your brain is actually moving faster, it's because adrenaline sharpens attention, packing more sensory data into those seconds. When you replay the moment later, the density of detail makes it feel stretched. And then there's the specious present, the short window of time your brain gathers before deciding this is now. Depending on the sensory data, that window might be only a fraction of a second or stretched to several seconds. This delay allows your brain to sync information from different senses, the flash of lightning and the rumble of thunder, into a coherent moment. But it also means the now you experience is already in the past. Time perception is malleable in everyday life too. Waiting for a reply to an important message makes seconds drag. Binge watching a series can make hours vanish without you noticing. Even your body temperature, mood, and age influence how quickly you feel time passing. Older adults often report that years seem to accelerate, perhaps because novelty declines and the brain compresses familiar routines into smaller mental space. Technology plays with this illusion constantly. Video games can alter your sense of time by flooding you with goals, feedback, and rapid events. Casinos use lighting and music to mask the passing of hours. And in deep conversation or creative flow, you can slip into what psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi called a flow state, where time seems to disappear entirely. But time illusions aren't just about speed, they're also about sequence. In experiments, scientists have shown that your brain can reorder events you experience, especially when visual and auditory cues arrive close together. This temporal binding ensures you perceive a coherent story, even if reality was messier. The cost? Sometimes your brain's tidy timeline is wrong. If vision tells you what's here and memory tells you what's gone, time is the thread that tells you where you are between them. But here's the catch. That thread is elastic. It stretches, shrinks, and sometimes tangles entirely. And when you start to see those knots, you realize something unsettling. You're not moving through time in a steady way. You're surfing a wave of constructed moments, one after another. Perhaps the most stubborn illusion in the web is the one that tells you there's a single you at the center of it all. A solid, unchanging self. The same person you were yesterday, last year, or 20 years ago. The reality, as neuroscience keeps reminding us, is far messier. Your sense of self is not a fixed object, but an ongoing process. A story your brain tells to keep its various systems coordinated. Inside your skull are countless neural circuits, each specialized for different tasks. Moving your limbs, remembering facts, making decisions, feeling emotions. They operate in parallel, often without direct communication. The you that feels unified is more like the captain of a ship who takes credit for the crew's work, even when the crew acted on its own. Split brain studies make this vividly clear. In patients whose corpus callosum, the bridge between brain hemispheres, has been severed, each half of the brain can perceive, decide, and act independently. Show a picture to one hemisphere, and it can trigger a response the other half can't explain. And yet, when asked, the speaking hemisphere will confidently invent a reason for the action, unaware that it's making it up. This interpreter function is always active, weaving whatever happens into a coherent narrative, whether or not the facts line up. Even in a healthy brain, the self is fluid. Your mood, hunger level, physical state, and surroundings can shift your personality in subtle ways. The you that exists during a calm morning coffee might feel like a completely different person from the you in a heated argument, yet your memory knits them together into a single identity. Meditation traditions have long taught that the self is an illusion, that if you look closely enough, you'll find no permanent I, only a flow of sensations, thoughts, and impulses. Modern neuroscience agrees. There is no central control room, no hidden homunculus pulling the levers. The self is more like a dance than a dancer. This illusion has practical benefits. Believing in a stable self gives you continuity, responsibility, and motivation. It's easier to plan for your future if you assume that future you will be basically the same person. But the illusion can also trap you. You might cling to outdated versions of yourself, resist change, or feel guilt over things done by a self who no longer exists in the same way. The web of illusions needs the self thread to hold together. Without it, the entire structure starts to unravel. If the I is a story, then so are your goals, your fears, your place in the world. That can be terrifying or liberating, depending on how you hold it. And once you glimpse that yourself might be just another construct, you start to wonder, what else in the web is just a story you've been telling all along? Beliefs feel solid. They feel like bedrock, unshakable truths you've tested, confirmed, and built your life upon. But in the web of illusions, beliefs are more like scaffolding, temporary structures erected from experience, culture, and bias, and maintained far more for stability than accuracy. At first glance, beliefs seem to arise from evidence. You observe, you reason, you decide. But research suggests it's often the other way around. You form a belief first, then search for evidence to support it. Psychologists call this confirmation bias, and it's astonishingly persistent. Even when presented with clear evidence that contradicts a belief, many people will either dismiss the evidence or twist it until it fits their original view. Beliefs are sticky because they're woven into identity. To question a belief can feel like questioning yourself. This is why debates about politics, religion, or deeply held values can feel so personal, and why people can cling to ideas even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And once a belief settles in, the brain defends it fiercely. The backfire effect describes a strange phenomenon where presenting corrective evidence actually strengthens the original false belief. It's as if the brain treats the challenge as an attack and responds by fortifying the walls. Some beliefs you inherit without ever examining them. The culture you're born into hands you an entire framework. Ideas about morality, beauty, fairness, and even what counts as common sense. Many of these ideas are invisible, like the background of a painting, always there, shaping perception, but rarely noticed. Then there are the beliefs that feel like direct knowledge, but are actually mental shortcuts. For example, the illusion of explanatory depth. You might believe you understand how something works, a zipper, a flush toilet, the stock market, until you try to explain it step by step. Only then do you realize your understanding is far shallower than you assumed. Beliefs also influence perception in subtle ways. In one study, people who believed in a just world, where good people are rewarded and bad people punished, were more likely to blame victims for their misfortunes, not because of malice, but because the belief required reality to be orderly, even if that order was imagined. In the web, beliefs function like anchor points. They give the rest of the strands something to attach to, but they can also trap you, because the more tightly the web is woven around a belief, the harder it becomes to untangle yourself from it. And here's the paradox: the most powerful beliefs often feel the least like beliefs. They feel like simple reality, which means the web's strongest threads are often the ones you don't even see. If beliefs are the internal scaffolding of the web, then the social mirror is the outer layer, the way other people's perceptions shape your own. From the moment you're born, your sense of self and your understanding of reality are reflected back to you by others. A baby learns what's safe, what's dangerous, and even how to interpret its own feelings through the reactions of caregivers. This never really stops. We're social creatures, constantly scanning for cues from those around us. This means your sense of what's normal, acceptable, or true is partly a product of the people you spend time with. It's why moving to a new culture can feel like stepping into an alternate reality. The social rules, values, and even humour may be entirely different, yet within that society, they feel just as natural as yours do. And because humans are wired for belonging, we're prone to social conformity. The famous Ash conformity experiments showed how easily people will agree with an obviously wrong answer if enough others give it first. This isn't just about fear of embarrassment, it's also about the brain's tendency to trust the group over the individual, even when the group is wrong. Social mirroring extends to emotions too. Psychologists call it emotional contagion, the way moods spread through a group. Spend time with anxious people, and you'll likely feel more anxious yourself. Spend time with calm, optimistic people, and you may feel lighter. The web transmits not just ideas, but emotional states. In the digital age, the social mirror has grown vast and distorted. Social media compresses millions of opinions, judgments, and curated images into a single glowing screen. It magnifies certain values, rewards certain behaviors, and punishes others, subtly reshaping beliefs and self-image in ways we often don't notice. And here's the most delicate part. Your identity in the social mirror is never entirely yours. It's a collage assembled from other people's interpretations, expectations, and projections. You may reject some of these reflections, embrace others, or try to control the image you project. But no matter what, you're always at least partly shaped by the eyes that look back at you. In the web of illusions, the social mirror is a powerful force, because when enough people agree on an illusion, it becomes indistinguishable from reality. Language feels like a tool, something you use to describe the world, but in truth it's more like the glass through which you see the world. It doesn't just describe reality, it shapes it. Every language has its own structure, categories, and metaphors, and these differences can influence how its speakers think. In some languages, there are dozens of words for different kinds of snow. In others, there might be no separate words for blue and green. These distinctions, or absences, subtly guide attention. If your language doesn't have a word for a certain concept, you might notice it less often, or think about it differently. Linguists call this the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the idea that the language you speak affects how you perceive and categorize the world. While extreme versions of this theory are debated, there's no doubt that language nudges thought. For instance, in English, time is often spoken of as a horizontal line, looking forward to the weekend, put the past behind you. In Mandarin, time can also be vertical. The past is up, the future is down. These metaphors influence how people arrange events in their minds. Language also shapes memory. In experiments, people asked to describe an accident where one car hit another, remembered it differently than those told one car smashed into another. The verbs altered their mental replay of the event. We don't just recall, we reconstruct, and words are the tools we use to rebuild the past. Even your sense of self is influenced by language. Some cultures use first-person pronouns constantly, others avoid them, focusing instead on relationships and group identity. These habits can reinforce an individualistic or collective worldview without you ever consciously choosing it. And then there's the illusion of objectivity. Once something has a name, it feels more real, more tangible. Naming can be powerful. It can make something easier to talk about, but it can also confine it, making you think the label is the thing itself. But reality is always messier than the words we have for it. Language is one of the strongest strands in the web because it's invisible in daily life. You think in it, dream in it, love and argue in it. It's not just a tool you use, it's the framework you inhabit. And when the frame changes, the picture changes with it. If language is the glass, then stories are the pictures you paint on it. Humans are storytelling creatures. We use narratives to make sense of the world, to explain the past, predict the future, and give meaning to the present. But the brain's love of stories comes with a cost. Sometimes the story matters more than the truth. From a young age, you learn to connect events into cause and effect chains. This happened because of that. Even when events are random or unrelated, your brain will search for a pattern, weaving them into a coherent plot. Psychologists call this the narrative fallacy, our tendency to create tidy explanations out of messy, uncertain realities. This tendency is so strong that you do it without noticing. When you tell the story of your life, you edit, not maliciously, but instinctively, highlighting some moments, omitting others, arranging events into an arc that feels meaningful. You're the protagonist, of course, and your choices lead somewhere. But in truth, life is often less a novel and more a collection of loosely connected short stories, some unfinished, some out of order. Stories can also lock you into identities. If you tell yourself, "I'm the kind of person who always," or "I've never been able to," you're not just describing yourself, you're scripting your future. The story becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. On a societal level, stories can bind communities or divide them. Myths, national histories, religious narratives, they offer a shared sense of meaning, but they also filter reality, emphasizing certain truths while ignoring or distorting others. Once a story is widely accepted, it can be hard to question without feeling like you're threatening the group's identity. The danger isn't in telling stories, it's in forgetting their stories. Once you mistake the narrative for reality, you stop noticing the details that don't fit, the loose threads that might lead you somewhere new. In the web of illusions, the story trap is a sticky strand. It keeps you oriented, gives you a sense of place and purpose, but it can also keep you circling the same patterns, unable to see beyond the script you've been handed, or the one you've been writing for yourself all along. Picture yourself at a crosswalk, pressing the button to summon the walk signal. You feel like you're helping things along, but in many cities that button doesn't do anything. It's just there to make you feel involved. That's the illusion of control, the sense that you have influence over outcomes that are actually beyond your reach. It's a psychological comfort blanket, and your brain loves it. In experiments, people given a fake control over a random process, like rolling dice or pressing a button that supposedly affects a game, often perform better simply because they feel in control. This isn't just placebo magic. Feeling in control reduces stress, increases focus, and boosts persistence. The control can be imaginary, but the benefits are real. This illusion shows up in everyday life. Athletes develop rituals before games, gamblers have lucky charms, and drivers press harder on the gas pedal when waiting for a traffic light, as if their foot could influence the timer. None of these actions change the actual outcome, but they help maintain a sense of agency. And it isn't just superstition. Even in situations where you do have some control, your brain tends to overestimate it. This is partly because being wrong about control is often less costly than underestimating it. Believing you can shape events might lead you to try harder, take risks, and sometimes succeed where hesitation would have failed. But the illusion has a darker side. It can lead to self-blame in situations that were never your responsibility. People sometimes believe they could have prevented an accident, a loss, or a tragedy if they'd only done something differently, even when the event was truly beyond their power. In the web of illusions, the control thread is double-edged. It keeps you moving forward, confident and proactive, but it can also bind you with guilt or unrealistic expectations. The trick is knowing when the feeling of control is useful, and when it's just a comforting story your brain tells to steady your hands. You walk into a coffee shop and see a menu full of options: espresso, cappuccino, latte, macchiato. It feels like freedom. So many choices. But in reality, the range is narrow, and the boundaries have been set for you long before you arrived. That's the choice mirage. The sense that you're making free, independent decisions when your options have already been shaped by outside forces. Marketers understand this well. Give people too many choices, and they feel overwhelmed. Give them just enough, usually between 3 and 7, and they feel empowered, even if every option leads to the same profit margin. Psychologists have found that the presentation of choices can shape the decision itself. In the famous jam experiment, shoppers who were offered 24 varieties of jam were less likely to buy than those offered only 6. More options didn't increase freedom, it paralyzed it. Even the order of choices matters. Restaurant menus place high-margin items where your eyes are most likely to land first. Political ballots sometimes list candidates in a way that statistically boosts the first name on the list. The choice feels yours, but the stage has been carefully set. Then there's the default effect. People are far more likely to stick with a pre-selected option than to change it, even when the change is easy. This is why countries with opt-out organ donation systems have much higher donor rates than opt-in systems. The decision feels voluntary, but inertia is doing most of the work. And beneath all this is an even deeper influence: the limits of your own mind. Your preferences, tastes, and priorities are shaped by upbringing, culture, and biology. You choose from the menu in front of you, but you rarely question who wrote the menu or why. The choice mirage keeps the web taut. It reassures you that you're steering your own life, even when the road, the map, and the vehicle itself were handed to you. Recognizing it doesn't remove the constraints, but it does let you start asking better questions. And maybe, sometimes, find the roads that aren't on the map at all. Value feels objective. Gold is valuable, diamonds are precious, a signed first edition is worth more than a paperback. But in the web of illusions, value isn't an inherent property of a thing. It's a story we agree to tell together. Consider diamonds. For most of history, they were just another gemstone. Rare, yes, but not an essential symbol of love or wealth. That changed in the mid-20th century when an advertising campaign declared that a diamond is forever. The phrase didn't just sell jewelry, it rewrote cultural values. Diamonds became the default engagement stone, their worth inflated not by scarcity alone, but by narrative. This isn't limited to luxury goods. The same coffee in two different cups can taste better if you believe one cup came from a high-end cafe. In experiments, wine drinkers consistently rate the same wine higher when told it's expensive. The flavour doesn't change, only the frame you put around it. Value illusions thrive on scarcity, real or manufactured. A limited time offer, a rare collectible, a one-night-only event, these trigger your brain's scarcity bias, the instinct that rare equals valuable. Sometimes that's true, but often it's engineered. A digital image can be endlessly copied, yet in the age of NFTs, its uniqueness can make it worth millions, at least to someone. And value isn't just about objects. We assign worth to experiences, skills, and even people based on context. A world-class violinist playing in a subway station can go unnoticed, while the same performance in a concert hall commands hundreds of dollars per ticket. The performance is identical. The perceived value is not. The value thread in the web can be one of the hardest to spot because it's reinforced by the market, tradition, and emotion. But once you see it, you start to notice how much of your life is guided by agreed-upon fictions, and how quickly those agreements can change. Most people carry, somewhere deep inside, a belief that the world should be fair, that good deeds are rewarded, hard work pays off, and wrongdoers get what they deserve. It's a comforting idea. It's also an illusion. The just world belief helps us function. It makes life feel predictable and moral effort worthwhile. But in reality, chance, privilege, and circumstance play enormous roles in outcomes. The straight-A student might miss a scholarship because of a technicality. The reckless driver might walk away unscathed from an accident. Life doesn't keep score the way we wish it would. This isn't to say fairness doesn't exist, only that it's fragile and uneven. In experiments, when people witness unfairness, they often experience genuine stress responses, even when they're not the ones being wronged. Our brains are wired to crave equity, perhaps because cooperation was vital in our evolutionary past. The illusion comes from the gap between that craving and reality. When the gap is too wide, we often adjust our perception of events to close it. If something bad happens to someone, we might assume they brought it on themselves, not out of cruelty, but because it's easier than admitting the world can be brutally random. Fairness illusions are reinforced by the systems we live in. Legal systems, school grading, workplace reviews, all present themselves as meritocratic, even when biases and external factors shape the results. The appearance of fairness keeps people invested, even if the balance is tilted. The danger isn't in wanting fairness, It's in mistaking the appearance of fairness for the real thing. In the web of illusions, this thread keeps people compliant, hopeful, and sometimes blind to deeper inequities. Pull it too hard, and the whole pattern of trust can unravel. We like to imagine that the arc of history bends inevitably toward improvement, that over time, things get better, fairer, more advanced. Technology marches forward, medicine improves, societies become more enlightened. And often this is true, but not always, and not in a straight line. The illusion of progress comes from the way our brains and cultures tell the story of the past. We compress centuries of struggle into neat timelines, highlighting milestones and downplaying setbacks. We celebrate the invention of vaccines, the spread of democratic ideals, the rise of human rights, but gloss over the periods where knowledge was lost, freedoms eroded, or entire civilizations collapsed. The truth is that progress can reverse. Rome fell, the Library of Alexandria burned, scientific knowledge in some fields regressed for centuries during the Dark Ages. In our own time, we can see social and political gains challenged or undone, and environmental conditions deteriorating despite technological advances. Yet the belief in inevitable progress is persistent because it motivates effort. If you believe the world is improving, you're more likely to work toward improvement. Societies teach this story not just to inspire, but to maintain stability. If people believe things are getting better, they're less likely to demand radical change. On a personal scale, the illusion shows up in the belief that your life will follow a steady upward trajectory, that you'll learn more, earn more, grow happier with age. Sometimes it works that way, but life's path is rarely that neat. There are plateaus, dips, even reversals. In the web of illusions, the progress projection is comforting. It gives you a sense of direction, a reason to invest in the future. But it can also make you complacent, assuming that improvement will happen without sustained effort, when in truth the arc bends only if someone keeps pulling it. Human brains hate randomness. Faced with noise, we instinctively search for patterns, and when we find none, we often invent them. This is the root of the randomness riddle, the illusion that chance events must follow some deeper logic. Gambling provides a vivid example. A roulette wheel lands on red 5 times in a row, and suddenly, players feel certain black is due, forgetting that each spin is independent. This gambler's fallacy is so persuasive that even people who understand probability can fall for it in the heat of the moment. In daily life, the same bias makes us see meaning in coincidences. You think of a friend, and they text you minutes later. You hear a song that perfectly matches your mood. These events stand out precisely because they fit a pattern, but they're often just statistical inevitabilities in a world where millions of tiny events happen every second. Your brain's pattern-seeking nature is a survival adaptation. In the wild, noticing a false pattern, mistaking a shadow for a predator, was less costly than missing a real one. Over time, this tendency became deeply ingrained, so much so that we often prefer a false sense of order to accepting pure chaos. Randomness, illusions can even shape memory. In hindsight, events in your life may appear to follow a logical chain, as if meeting your partner, landing your job, or moving to a new city was inevitable. But remove just one link in that chain, and the entire path might have been different. The meaning was stitched in later by the storyteller in your head. In the web of illusions, the randomness thread keeps the pattern intact. It reassures you that the world is knowable, that surprises can be explained, and that luck can be managed. But underneath, the dice keep rolling, indifferent to your theories. Freedom is one of the most powerful and cherished ideas we hold. The belief that we act by our own will, guided by our own desires, independent of coercion. But in the web of illusions, freedom is more complicated than it appears. At the biological level, many of your actions begin before you're even aware of making a decision. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet's experiments showed that measurable brain activity, the readiness potential, precedes conscious awareness of a decision by several hundred milliseconds. In other words, your brain has already started to act before you feel like you've chosen to. That doesn't necessarily mean free will doesn't exist, but it suggests that the feeling of making a choice might be more like a narrator catching up to the plot than an author writing it. The you that takes credit for deciding may simply be the one that explains it after the fact. Freedom is also shaped, and sometimes limited, by environment, upbringing, and culture. The paths you see as available, the goals you think worth pursuing, even the emotions you're comfortable expressing are influenced by forces outside your control. You might feel free to choose any career, but that freedom is already framed by economic realities, educational opportunities, and social expectations. And yet, the belief in freedom is vital. Without it, motivation falters. People who feel powerless are more likely to give up, even in situations where they could have influence. That's why the facade is so persistent. The illusion fuels action, and action can create genuine change. In the web of illusions, the freedom thread is fragile, but bright. It inspires, it drives, it gives shape to ambition, but it also hides the many unseen hands that helped lay the road you're walking, and sometimes built the walls on either side. We like to think of ourselves as reasonable beings, capable of seeing the world clearly when we set aside emotion and bias. But true objectivity, a purely neutral view of reality, may be impossible for a human brain. Perception itself is filtered through the architecture of your senses. You don't see infrared light, you can't hear ultrasonic frequencies, and you can only detect a fraction of the information around you. Your objective view is already cropped and color-graded by biology. Even when dealing with abstract information, your mind leans on shortcuts, heuristics, to make sense of complexity. These shortcuts are fast and efficient, but they can also introduce bias. The availability heuristic, for example, makes you judge the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind, which is why people often overestimate the danger of rare but dramatic events, like plane crashes, and underestimate the risk of common but quiet ones, like heart disease. Confirmation bias adds another twist. You naturally seek out information that supports what you already believe and discount what contradicts it. This isn't always deliberate. Your attention simply sticks to the familiar and agreeable. Even scientists, whose work is designed to be as objective as possible, are influenced by their own perspectives. What questions they choose to ask, what data they collect, and how they interpret it can be shaped by cultural context, funding sources, or prevailing theories. The history of science is filled with examples of objective truths that later turned out to be products of bias. Objectivity isn't useless, it's an ideal worth pursuing, but in the web of illusions, it's more like the horizon. You can move toward it, but you'll never quite reach it. The important thing isn't to remove all bias, that's impossible, but to know it's there, tugging at every thread you see. You wake up in the same bed, walk the same streets, see the same landmarks, and it's easy to believe they'll always be there. This is the permanence phantom, the illusion that the people, places, and conditions of your life are more fixed than they really are. Part of this comes from the stability of short-term memory and habit. When something has been the same for days, months, or years, your brain tags it as reliable, even though history shows that nothing in human life is truly permanent. Cities change, relationships evolve, traditions fade, even mountains erode grain by grain. On a personal level, the illusion keeps you anchored. If you felt the fragility of everything all at once, it might be overwhelming. The permanence phantom allows you to plan, to invest in relationships, to imagine a future with some continuity. But it also makes change more jarring. When a long-standing routine ends, a friendship dissolves, a neighborhood transforms, a building is demolished, it can feel like the ground has shifted under you. The shock is partly because the permanence was never real. It was a projection your brain had quietly reinforced with every familiar encounter. This illusion also shapes how we treat the planet. We see rivers, forests, and species as stable backdrops rather than dynamic systems that can and do vanish. By the time we notice the change, the loss can be irreversible. In the web of illusions, the permanence thread is gentle but deceptive. It soothes you with a sense of continuity, while the world quietly rearranges itself under the surface. Recognizing its fragility doesn't have to be frightening. It can also make the present feel more vivid, more worth savoring. Few things feel more satisfying than the sense of knowing. Whether it's how a machine works, the cause of a historical event, or the meaning of a new word, knowledge feels solid, like you've pinned something down. But the knowledge veil hides a surprising truth. Much of what we think we know is partial, outdated, or wrong. One reason is the illusion of explanatory depth. You might believe you understand how everyday things work, a zipper, a bicycle, a toilet, until you're asked to explain them in detail. Suddenly the gaps appear. You didn't have a complete map, you had a sketch. Another reason is that knowledge is often second-hand. We inherit facts from teachers, books, news, and conversations, and our trust in them depends on the credibility of the source. But sources can be biased, incomplete, or mistaken. Once an idea takes root in our mental library, it can feel just as true as something we've verified ourselves, even if it's wrong. Compounding this is the fact that the world changes faster than our mental models. Scientific consensus evolves, technology transforms possibilities, and new evidence rewrites old conclusions. What was certain a decade ago may now be obsolete. Yet the brain tends to cling to earlier knowledge, resisting updates. This isn't to say knowledge is useless, only that it's rarely as solid as it feels. The awareness that your mental map is provisional can be humbling, but it also keeps curiosity alive. In the web of illusions, the knowledge veil is one of the trickiest threads, because it hides behind confidence. You don't question what you think you know, until the veil lifts and the ground beneath it shifts. And even then, it's tempting to weave the veil back into place, just to feel steady again. Look back at an old photo of yourself, a school portrait perhaps, or a snapshot from a holiday years ago. You probably feel like that person is still you, just younger. But the identity continuity illusion hides how much has changed, both inside and out. Your body is in constant renewal. Cells die and are replaced. Your skin, blood, and even much of your skeleton have been rebuilt many times since that photo was taken. On a cellular level, you are not the same person. Your mind has changed too, in ways you may not notice day to day. Memories have been rewritten or forgotten. Beliefs have shifted. Skills have been gained or lost. Even your personality, which feels stable, can change subtly in response to life events, environment, and age. Studies tracking people over decades show that traits like openness, conscientiousness, and emotional stability often shift significantly over time. And yet you feel like a continuous self because your brain stitches together the narrative. It takes the scattered fragments of past experience and binds them with the present moment, smoothing over contradictions. The child who feared the dark, the teenager who wanted to be an astronaut, the adult you are now. The brain threads them into a single storyline called me. This illusion is useful. It helps you maintain commitments, build relationships, and navigate the world with a sense of continuity. But it can also trap you in outdated versions of yourself. You may cling to old goals or habits because they feel tied to your true identity, even when they no longer serve you. In the web of illusions, the identity continuity thread holds the self together. Pull it too hard, and you may find that you are less a fixed character than an evolving series of drafts. Feelings are persuasive. Joy, anger, fear, love. They don't just colour your perception, they become it. When you feel something strongly, it can seem like a direct reflection of reality. This is the emotional truth trap, the illusion that because an emotion is real, the interpretation behind it must be real too. Fear is a clear example. Standing on a high balcony might trigger a rush of anxiety, convincing you it's dangerous, even if the railing is secure. The feeling is genuine, but the danger may not be. Likewise, suspicion can feel like proof of betrayal, sadness like proof of loss beyond repair, and excitement like proof of a perfect opportunity. Part of the illusion comes from how emotions evolved. They're quick, efficient responses designed to guide survival decisions before logic catches up. If you hear rustling in the dark, fear pushes you to act fast, whether it's a predator or just the wind. Emotions also shape memory. A happy mood can make you recall more positive experiences. A sad mood can highlight losses and failures. The emotional lens you're looking through can make the same set of facts feel entirely different. The trap isn't in feeling emotions, they're vital and often wise. The trap is in mistaking the feeling for proof. Acting on unexamined emotional truth can lead to misunderstandings, impulsive decisions, and even conflict. In the web of illusions, the emotional truth thread is vibrant and magnetic. It can draw you toward connection, empathy, and joy, or pull you into fear, bias, and overreaction. Seeing it for what it is doesn't weaken emotions. It simply reminds you that they're signals, not verdicts. There's a peculiar comfort in finding that other people agree with you. It makes your opinion feel sturdier, more legitimate, as if truth becomes truer when it's shared. This is the consensus glow, the illusion that the more people believe something, the more likely it is to be correct. On the surface, it's not unreasonable. If 10 people independently tell you a bridge is unsafe, you'd be wise to take the warning seriously. But consensus can be misleading because agreement often spreads socially, not logically. People tend to echo the beliefs of those around them, a process amplified in tight-knit communities and online spaces. Social media magnifies this effect. Algorithms learn what you like, then surround you with more of it. Over time, your feed can make it seem like everyone shares your view, when in reality, you're just seeing a carefully curated slice of the world. History is full of examples where widespread consensus was wrong. For centuries, it was common knowledge that the sun revolved around the earth. Medical consensus once endorsed bloodletting as a cure for disease. The fact that nearly everyone agreed didn't make those ideas true. The consensus glow also influences personal decisions. You may choose a restaurant because it's crowded, assuming the food is better, or feel more confident in a choice when friends nod along. This is the bandwagon effect, the gravitational pull of popular opinion. In the web of illusions, the consensus thread binds people together. It fosters unity, but it can also trap groups in shared error. The glow of agreement feels warm, but it can blind you to the shadows at its edge. A neat, simple explanation is deeply satisfying. It's easier to remember, easier to share, and easier to believe. That's the simplicity mirage, the tendency to favour clear, elegant answers over complex, messy truths. Part of this comes from the brain's need to conserve energy. Simpler models are quicker to process, so they feel right, even when they're incomplete. In science, politics, and everyday life, people are drawn to narratives that strip away nuance. This happened because of that is easier to digest than this happened because of a tangle of interconnected causes, some of which we don't fully understand. The problem is that reality often is that tangle. Oversimplification can lead to misunderstanding, or worse, to false confidence. Conspiracy theories exploit the simplicity mirage by offering neat explanations for chaotic events, replacing randomness with deliberate plots. Even in personal life, simplicity can distort. A relationship might end, and you tell yourself it's because of one flaw or one incident. The real story may involve hundreds of small interactions, shifting priorities, and unspoken feelings. The simple story feels cleaner, but it hides the real texture of events. The simplicity mirage persists because it works well enough most of the time. Simplified models let you act quickly in everyday situations, even if they're not perfect. But in the web of illusions, this thread can disguise complexity so thoroughly that you stop looking for it. Recognizing the mirage doesn't mean abandoning simplicity altogether. It means remembering that every clean line hides a messier sketch underneath. The human mind loves the idea that the future can be mapped, that with enough information, we can forecast what's coming. This is the predictability illusion, the belief that life's events follow patterns we can reliably chart. Part of this stems from real successes in prediction. Weather forecasts, stock market models, and election polls sometimes work well enough to make us forget how fragile they are. When they fail, we often chalk it up to a rare exception, rather than a reminder that uncertainty is built into the system. The brain is wired for prediction because anticipating danger or opportunity was key to survival. If you saw clouds gathering and guessed that rain was coming, you could prepare. But this instinct also leads us to overextend, imagining that trends will continue indefinitely, or that knowing the past guarantees understanding of the future. The illusion gets stronger when patterns are visible in hindsight. You look back at your own life and see a path that feels inevitable. The job you landed, the person you met, the city you moved to. In reality, it may have been shaped by 1,000 tiny coincidences you couldn't have seen coming. This illusion comforts because it gives you a sense of control. Believing the future can be predicted makes planning feel worthwhile, but it can also blind you to black swan events, rare, unexpected disruptions that change everything. In the web of illusions, the predictability thread hums softly beneath all the others, lulling you into thinking tomorrow will be a familiar extension of today. Sometimes it will be, sometimes it won't. Stories have endings, books close, movies fade to black, and even the conversations we remember tend to feel like they had a clear, final note. This shapes the ending illusion, the sense that events in real life conclude in neat, satisfying ways. But real life rarely gives you such closure. Friendships drift without a final goodbye. Opportunities fade without a decisive no. Even deaths, which feel like the most definitive ending, leave echoes in memories, habits, and unresolved questions. The illusion comes from our narrative instincts. We want to package experiences into arcs with beginnings, middles, and ends. This makes them easier to understand and share, but it also means we sometimes invent or exaggerate endings just to make the story feel complete. Consider personal milestones, graduations, weddings, retirements. These are presented as endings to one chapter, but they're really transitions into another. The ending illusion smooths the messy overlap between phases of life, making it feel as though there's a clean break when there isn't. It also affects how we process the past. You may assign a single event as the moment something ended, a fight that ended, a friendship, a meeting that ended, a career, when the unravelling may have started much earlier and continued long after. In the web of illusions, the ending thread is bittersweet. It gives shape to chaos, lets us mark time, and sometimes provides the emotional closure we crave. But it can also hide the truth that most things don't end. They just change form. There are moments when you feel truly alone, convinced your struggles, thoughts, or experiences are uniquely yours. This is the isolation illusion, the belief that your inner world is sealed off from others in a way that makes connection incomplete or impossible. Part of this illusion comes from how we experience consciousness. You can only directly inhabit your own mind, so the thoughts of others are always guesses, even when they share them with you. That gap can make you feel fundamentally separate, as if no one could ever fully understand. Yet research and human experience suggest the opposite. Many emotions and struggles are widely shared, even if rarely voiced. Loneliness, grief, self-doubt, These are nearly universal. But because people hide their messiest feelings behind curated expressions, you may assume you're the only one who feels them. The isolation illusion is amplified by modern life. Digital communication allows for constant connection, but it often replaces depth with breadth, many shallow ties instead of a few deep ones. Social media, with its highlight reels, can make everyone else's life seem polished and complete, deepening your sense of being the odd one out. Paradoxically, this illusion can dissolve quickly in the right setting. A candid conversation, a support group, an unguarded moment between friends. The recognition that others share your fears and flaws can be startling, even life-changing. In the web of illusions, the isolation thread is both dangerous and protective. It can keep you from seeking help, but it also pushes you toward self-reliance. The trick is remembering that while your thoughts are private, your humanity is not. Humans are natural meaning makers. Faced with chaos, we instinctively look for purpose and significance, a reason why things happen. This is the meaning mirage, the belief that life events, especially personal ones, must carry an underlying message or destiny. It's not hard to see why this illusion persists. Finding meaning in hardship can help people cope, turning random suffering into something that feels purposeful. Survivors of accidents or illnesses often describe their experiences as a wake-up call or a turning point, reframing trauma as transformation. But meaning is often assigned after the fact. The same event could be interpreted in countless ways depending on who's telling the story, their mood, and what happened afterward. The meaning doesn't reside in the event itself. It's woven in by the mind. This mirage can be comforting, but it can also be dangerous. People may see signs and patterns where none exist, or cling to harmful situations because they believe there's a reason they must endure them. It can also lead to guilt, the idea that something bad must have happened because of a flaw or failure in oneself. Yet the meaning in mirage is not without value. Humans thrive on narratives that connect the dots, even if the lines are drawn after the fact. Whether or not meaning is real in an objective sense, it can still shape motivation, resilience, and hope. In the web of illusions, the meaning thread glows brightly, perhaps brighter than any other. It pulls us towards stories that give order to the world, even if that order exists only in our minds. We've already met the ending illusion, the belief that events tie up neatly. But there's a subtler version, the beyond endings illusion, the quiet conviction that after the ending, there's a final point of rest. It's the idea that once you reach a certain milestone, retirement, publishing the book, finding the one, you'll step into a permanent state of satisfaction or stability. The journey will be over, and you'll simply be. But life rarely grants such stillness. Retirement brings new challenges and adjustments. The finished book may spark the urge to write another. Relationships, however loving, continue to evolve and demand care. The so-called after is just another during. This illusion often lingers because it's comforting. It makes effort feel purposeful. Once I get there, I can relax. It's a mental finish line that motivates the run. Yet when the line is crossed, another often appears in the distance. Philosophers and psychologists have long noted this restless pattern, what's sometimes called the hedonic treadmill. Achievements and changes bring temporary boosts in happiness, but the baseline tends to return, pushing us to seek the next summit. In the web of illusions, the beyond endings thread keeps you moving, searching for a place of final arrival. But perhaps its quiet truth is that there is no final arrival, only an unbroken line of beginnings disguised as endings. Here, at the center of the night's journey, we step back to see the whole design. Every thread, control, choice, value, fairness, progress, randomness, freedom, objectivity, permanence, knowledge, identity, emotion, consensus, simplicity, predictability, ending, Isolation, meaning, and all the rest is part of a single structure, the web itself. Individually, each illusion can deceive, comfort, mislead, or protect. Together, they form the scaffolding of everyday life. Without them, the world might feel unbearably raw, too vast, too chaotic, too uncertain to navigate. The web doesn't just trap, it holds. It's woven from survival strategies, cognitive shortcuts, and cultural stories that have evolved over millennia. Some strands are sticky, keeping you bound in habits and assumptions. Others are strong, supporting you when reality threatens to pull you down. And some shimmer, illusions so beautiful you might never want them to break. Seeing the web doesn't mean escaping it. Total freedom from illusion might not be possible, or even desirable. What changes is your relationship to it. You can learn which threads to trust, which to tug, and which to slip free from when they no longer serve you. Perhaps the greatest illusion of all is that truth and illusion are opposites. In reality, they are tangled together, each giving shape to the other. The web isn't just a trap, it's also the bridge you walk across every day, toward whatever lies beyond the next thread. And in that awareness, in seeing both the strands and the spaces between, you may find a freedom that's not an escape from the web, but a way of moving through it with open eyes.